Melodious is a fusion-based archetype introduced in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, showcasing an incredible ensemble of musical talents. Songstresses are the opening performance of the show, driving the deck's performance forwards. Divas are the lower level monsters, setting up the stage for bigger plays, supporting the main stars. Maestras are the higher level, more powerful monsters that offer disruption or elevate the show to even greater heights. The composer brings structure and harmony to the strategy, orchestrating key plays. Finally, the Magnificat is the ultimate star of the show, delivering the grand climatic finale. So first we'll take a look at the deck profile, and then I'll showcase some basic combos the deck can do to show you what it's capable of. And now without any further ado, let's get started.
Alright, we're starting off with a high note. Refrain the Melodious Songstress, the new main starter monster of the deck. It searches any Melodious monster when normal or special summoned. If it's face up in the extra deck and a Melodious Fusion monster is special summoned, you can place Refrain directly into the Pendulum Zone. And if it's in your Pendulum Zone, you can target a Melodious Fusion monster, then send any Melodious monster from the deck to the graveyard. That Fusion monster gains attack equal to the monster's level times 200 until the end of the turn. So yeah, this card is crazy, essentially handling everything. First it searches, then it fills up one of the Pendulum skills, and it sets up the graveyard as well. And one of the cards we'll often search for with this effect is Couplet the Melodious Songstress. Because when this card is added to your hand, except by drawing it, you can reveal it to special summon one level 4 or lower Melodious monster from your hand or graveyard. Like Refrain, Couplet can place herself in the Pendulum Zone from the extra deck. And her Pendulum effect lets you search for any Melodious spell or trap card, as long as you control only Melodious monsters. Additionally, she locks you into Pendulum summoning only light monsters when she's in the Pendulum Zone. Next up, Soprano the Melodious Songstress. This card helps you get your fusion plays going, as she can initiate a fusion summon with monsters you control, including herself. This effect is not a hard once per turn, so if you can summon her multiple times, you can reuse the effect. When Soprano is special summoned, you can also recycle a Melodious in the graveyard back to your hand, though this effect is a hard once per turn. Chopina lets you recover any light fairy monster from the graveyard to your hand, and like Soprano, this recycling effect is not a hard once per turn, allowing multiple uses if we summon her again. However, activating that effect locks you out of non-light monster effects for the rest of the turn, so keep that limitation in mind. Next we have a couplet of extenders. Cannon and Sonata the Melodious Diva. Cannon can be special summoned once per turn for free if you control a Melodious monster. She also has an effect to change the battle position of one of your Melodious monsters, not too relevant. Sonata can also be special summoned for free if you control a Melodious monster, but unlike Cannon, this effect isn't limited to once per turn, so you can summon her as many times as possible. Additionally, if Sonata was special summoned, she increases the attack and defense of all your fairy monsters by 500. Then for the last Melodious monsters, one Aria and one Elegy the Melodious Diva. Aria protects your Melodious monster from being targeted by card effects or being destroyed by battle, as long as she's special summoned. Elegy prevents special summoned Melodious monster from being destroyed by card effects. And if she was special summoned, all fairy monsters you control gain 300 attack. Together, these two protect your Melodious monster from being targeted and destroyed by battle and card effects, which is really good. It's not something you'll be able to pull off very consistently while still playing through your opponent's hand traps, but I still like to have the option available. One important ruling to note, Aria's effect prevents both players from targeting Melodious monsters. This can sometimes prevent you from activating certain effects, like Refrain for example, which requires you to target one of your fusion monsters. So if you control Aria, Refrain's effect won't work. Definitely something to keep in mind. That's it for the monsters, now onto the Melodious spells. This archetype does have some insane spell cards, starting with Ostinato. This card lets you summon out a Melodious Fusion monster from your extra deck by using 2 monsters in your hand and deck as material. However, you can only activate it if you control no monsters. And this card is not a hard once per turn, by the way, so if it gets negated and you have another copy, you can use it again. The fusion summoned monster is destroyed during the end phase, but you'll get the materials back from the graveyard if it was destroyed this way. Next we also have triple first movement solo. This spell lets you summon a level 4 or lower Melodious monster directly from the deck, if you control no monsters. But you cannot special summon any monsters this turn except for Melodious monsters, and you can only use this card once per turn. Our final in-archetype spell is Melodious Concerto. This is also a fusion spell that lets you summon any fairy fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters in your hand, field and pendulum zones as material. Additionally, if a Melodious fusion monster is sent to the graveyard while Concerto is also in the graveyard, you can return Concerto to the bottom of the deck and draw a card. This effect even works during the damage step, which is pretty cool. However, both effects are a hard once per turn. That's it for the Melodious cards in the deck. One of the deck's main strengths is the flexibility it has for hand traps and generic staples. These can be customized depending on where you're playing the deck, whether it's a TCG or a Master Duel, and what staples are strong against the popular decks in the current format. One of the best hand traps this deck can play is Herald of Orange Light. This card can negate the activation of a monster effect and destroy it, by discarding itself along with another fairy monster. Herald is not once per turn and can even be used to negate the opponent's monster hand traps. This card is also why I like to play a slightly higher count of Melodious monsters, since you don't want to end up with just Herald and one Melodious starter in your hand, which you don't really want to discard. For the next hand traps, we're running 3 Ash Blossom, triple Impermanence, 2 Veiler, 2 Droll, and 2 Dominus Purge. This card can be activated from the hand if your opponent controls a card. It functions similar to Ash Blossom. When a card effect is activated that adds a card from the deck to the hand, it negates that effect. And if you already have a trap card in your graveyard, it also destroys that card. Very cool. But if you activate Dominus Purge from your hand, you're restricted from activating the effects of Dark, Water and Fire monsters for the rest of the duel. This only conflicts with Ash Blossom in our deck, so if you open with both, you just want to try and use Ash first. It also locks you out from using certain cards in your extra deck. And for the last couple of cards, 1 Pot of Prosperity. This card helps dig deeper into the deck, searching for key starters like Ostinato, First Movement Solo or Refrain, Called by the Grave to stop our opponent's hand traps, and finally 2 Triple Tactics Talent, an incredible, flexible and powerful card for various situations. And that's the final note for the main deck. Now let's bring out the star performers for the extra deck. The extra deck's opening act usually starts by summoning Baka the Melodious Maestra, because if it's special summoned it lets you summon any Melodious monster directly from the deck. And if it's sent to the graveyard it can revive any Melodious monster in the graveyard in defense except for itself. It also prevents the activated effects of your fusion monsters from being negated. The ruling on this last effect can be a bit difficult ruling technically. So here's an example. Ash Blossom cannot negate Baka's special summoning effect from the deck, since Ash only negates that specific effect. However, both Effect Veiler and Impermanence can negate it since they negate the entire card, which includes Baka's protection effect, so keep that in mind. The next performer is Schuberta the Melodious Maestra. Schuberta has a quick effect that lets you banish up to 3 cards from either player's graveyard, gaining 200 attack for each. This card can provide some nice disruption during the opponent's turn. Next up, ready to take center stage, is Bloom Harmonist the Melodious Composer, together with Bloom Diva the Melodious Choir. Bloom Harmonist can special summon 2 Melodious monsters with different levels straight from the deck in defense by discarding a card. This effect locks you into special summoning only Melodious monsters for the turn, and it's a once per turn effect. It also offers some form of protection during battle until the end of the damage step, preventing your opponent from activating cards or effects if one of the monsters it points to attacks. Bloom Diva cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, and you take no battle damage involving this card. If it battles a special summoned monster, it can destroy that monster after damage calculation, burning your opponent for the difference in their original attack. Although you won't summon Bloom Diva often, it can come in clutch, getting rid of problematic monsters and dealing a ton of damage. It was the archetype's original boss monster, so definitely nice we still have space in the extra deck for it. And now for the show-stopping finale, Flowering Étoile the Melodious Magnificat. This is the deck's new boss monster, inspired by Zuzu Boyle from the anime who used the Melodious deck. You can even see Flowering wearing Zuzu's iconic bracelet. We saw the same thing last year where the character Gong Strong was turned into the super heavy samurai boss monster, Brave Masurawo. Pretty cool. Flowering has a quick effect that allows you to banish any number of Melodious monsters you control until the end phase, to then return that many face-up cards your opponent controls to the hand. And if this face-up fusion summoned card leaves the field due to an opponent's cards, you can special summon a Melodious monster from your deck or extra deck, except for itself. These effects are really good and can be used for dodging effects and hand traps like Nibiru, or clearing your own field to activate Ostinato or First Movement Solo, which require an empty field. And that concludes the Melodious lineup. Now let's fill in some of the supporting acts in our utility slots. Gravity Controller can send Baka to the graveyard to trigger its effect if it gets negated, or clear your extra monster zone if needed. Haggard Lizard Dose is here for the same reasons. It can link away 2 monsters and then banish itself to clear your board for Ostinato. Protector of the Agents provides some additional utility by tributing one of your fairy monsters, including itself, to destroy 1 card on the field. This is helpful for removing problematic cards like Skill Drain. Finally, we have Baguska to slow down the game by putting every monster in defense position and negating their effects. Typhon to help break through your opponent's board on follow-up turns. SP Little Knight is the best option for the last slot. I don't currently have a physical copy, so I'm using Underworld Goddess instead. And that's it for the deck profile. Now on to the combos. Combo number 1 shows what you can do with just one Ostinato, the ideal starter of the deck. We activate it and send the Refrain and Soprano from the deck to the graveyard to fusion summon Baka the Melodious Maestra in the extra monster zone. Then we use her effect to special summon any Melodious from the deck, and we'll choose Shopina, who can recycle any light fairy monster back to our hand. So we'll grab Refrain back and normal summon it. Refrain allows us to search for any Melodious monster. We'll pick the Couplet and use her effect to revive Soprano from the graveyard. Next we place Couplet in the Pendulum Zone to use her other effect to search for a Melodious spell or trap card. We'll take Melodious Concerto and activate it. Now we can perform a fusion summon and even use monsters in the Pendulum Zones as material. We'll use Shopina, who goes to the graveyard, and Refrain and Couplet, which go to the extra deck face up, to summon our new boss monster, Flowering, as our 5th summon. Now that a Melodious monster has been summoned, we can use the effect of both Refrain and Couplet in the extra deck to place them directly into the Pendulum Scales. Next we'll use Soprano's effect to fusion summon her together with Baka to summon Schuberta. Now that Baka has been sent to the graveyard, we can activate her effect to revive another Melodious from the graveyard as Chainlink 1, and Concerto's effect is Chainlink 2. First we'll place Concerto on the bottom of the deck, then draw a card, and Baka will revive Shopina from the graveyard, allowing us to recycle another card from the graveyard back to our hand, since her effect isn't a hard once per turn. With a Melodious fusion monster now on the field, we can use Refrain to send any Melodious monster from the deck to the graveyard, like Sonata, which will then recycle to our hand with Shopina. Then we special summon Sonata and link her and Shopina away into Bloom Harmonist. When this card is link summoned, we can special summon 2 Melodious monsters with different levels straight from the deck by discarding a card. We'll discard the random card we just drew and special summon from the deck Aria the Melodious Diva and Allergy. And here's essentially our ideal end board. Aria protects all our monsters from being targeted or destroyed by battle. Allergy prevents our monsters from being destroyed by card effects. Schuberta can quick effect banish up to 3 cards in any graveyard. Finally, Flowering can banish any number of Melodious monsters to bounce up to the same amount of cards back to the hand. If she leaves the field because of an opponent's card, she can summon out any other Melodious monster from the deck or extra deck. And we did this just off of 1 card, and we didn't even use our Pendulum Summon. This combo highlights the deck's potential. At first it may seem straightforward, just follow some standard lines. But this deck has a surprising amount of flexibility, and mastering it definitely takes time. You really need to learn the deck inside and out to play it correctly. There are plenty of details to keep track of, like non-once per turn effects, soft and hard once per turn effects, and the summoning restrictions you're locked into at any given moment. The next combo only requires first movement solo and a card to discard. We'll start by activating first movement solo to special summon Refrain from the deck, who then searches Soprano, which will then normal summon. Then use its effect to fuse her and Refrain into Baka. Next we use Baka's effect as Chainlink 1 and Refrain as Chainlink 2 to set up the Pendulum Zone. Then Baka special summons Shopina from the deck. Now we use Refrain's effect, target Baka to send Couplet to the graveyard, which we then add back to our hand with Chopina's effects. We could use her revive effect here, but in this case we're not going to because we want to keep the amount of summons in check to play around Nibiru. Next we use her pendulum effect to search and activate Concerto. We fuse Couplet, which goes to the extra deck, with Chopina and Baka to bring out Flowering as the 5th summon. Then we activate Baka as Chainlink 1 and Couplet as Chainlink 2 to set the pendulum scale, and Baka reborns Chopina from the graveyard. So we can use her effect again to grab Soprano back from the graveyard. Next, we pendulum summon Soprano and use her ability to return Baka back to the extra deck. We then link Chopina and Soprano away into Bloom Harmonist, who allows us to special summon 2 Melodious monsters with different levels from the deck by discarding a card. We'll bring out Aria and Allergy straight from the deck. And with this end board, all our monsters cannot be targeted or destroyed by battle and card effects. We can bounce up to 4 cards back to the opponent's hand, plus we summoned Flowering as our 5th summon, making the combo less vulnerable to Nibiru, because you can chain and banish all monsters until the end phase. This combo showcases what you can do with Refrain as a 1-card combo. We start by normal summoning her and use the search effect to grab Couplet. Then we use her pendulum effect to add and activate Concerto. We fuse them together and make Baka. Now we use Baka's effect as Chainlink 1 and Refrain and Couplet as Chainlink 2 and 3 to set up the pendulum scales and summon Chopina from the deck. Next we use Refrain's pendulum ability to send Aria to the graveyard, then add her back to the hand with Chopina's effects. Next we link these two off into Bloom Harmonist and use her on summon effect as Chainlink 1, discard Aria, Baka in the grave as Chainlink 2 and Concerto as Chainlink 3. Concerto goes to the bottom of the deck to draw a random card. Baka revives Chopina from the graveyard, and Harmonist special summons Soprano and a second copy of Couplet. Soprano can, if she's special summoned, add a Melodious in the grave back to her hand, so we can recycle the Aria again. Important here is that the Soprano is a when effect. This means that you have to use Bloom Harmonist as Chainlink 1 to not miss timing on that effect. Then we use her other ability to fuse her together with Couplet to make Schuberta. But Soprano is not done, because now we can add her back to our hand with Chopina, and then pendulum summon her out together with Aria and Couplet. Finally, we use her fusion ability again together with these to summon out Flowering. So with this end board we still have all our monsters protected from targeting effects and destruction by battle. We can bounce 4 cards back to the opponent's hand, and we can banish up to 3 cards from the opponent's graveyard during their turn. And that's it for the deck profile and combos. If you find this video helpful, you should consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future videos. Share your thoughts about the Melodious deck in the comment section down below. Let me know what your favorite Pendulum deck is, and I see you later.